guys, what's up? What's cracking? My name is Kylie. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So if you couldn't tell from the title, this is a part 2 to low-rated horror movies that I love. If you haven't seen the first one, I recommend watching that one as well. You don't have to watch it first, but these movies are all part of one big list. Now, the reason that I am making this video is because there are a lot of low-rated horror movies that I love, and I feel like horror movies just get graded really harshly for some reason. I don't really know why, but they do, and I think that a lot of them don't really deserve it, so I'm here to talk about some of them today. Side note, if you're wondering about the different background and the different couch and whatever, I am actually at home right now. I am up in Northern California because all my classes are now online, and I really wanted to see my family. I hadn't been in contact with anyone with the virus or anything like that, so it was safe for me to come home. Trust me, I asked my parents multiple times if I should come home, but everything is all good. Sorry, sidetracked. Let's get into it. So the first movie that I want to talk about today is Haunter. This movie came out in 2013 and it's rated at a 56%. In Haunter, the ghost of a teenage girl is stuck in a time loop on the day she and her family were murdered. After becoming aware of her death, she tries to protect a young girl from becoming the next victim of the serial killer who murdered her and her family. So I feel like right off the bat, you can tell from that brief synopsis that this is a pretty unique premise for a movie. I know that 56% isn't super low, but it's also not super high considering how original this movie is, at least in my opinion. It's starring Abigail Breslin. You might recognize her from a couple other things, like she was in that one show Scream Queens with Emma Roberts. Oh, she was in Signs when she was a little girl. She started the movie Signs. She's a really good actress. There aren't really any other super big names in this movie. She really takes the lead. But the villain in this movie is very interesting, and I think he's pretty unique, and he definitely adds a nice dynamic to the movie that I think sets it apart from other horror movies, because a lot of times there isn't actually like a villain, it's a supernatural entity, and in this case it's sort of a melding of the two. And this movie came out in 2013, which was 7 years ago at this point, but when it came out, I was in middle school, okay? But all my friends and I were really into horror movies, and we watched a lot of PG-13 horror movies, and nobody really talked about this one. Even back then, I found it, I think, probably in like my sophomore year of high school. A lot of my friends saw it only because I showed it to them. So besides that, no one ever talked about this movie. None of my other friends that are fans of horror, like in our discussions, it's never come up somehow, but it's a movie that I've rewatched several times and I really love. It's also unique because there's no emphasis on bad language, on gore, blood, or sex, which are usually really big things in horror, and it's still scary without all those elements, so it's very unique. I highly recommend it. The second movie on this list is going to be The Hunt. So The Hunt comes in at a 53%. Pretty low for how funny this movie was and how stacked the cast was. Now, I'm not really gonna get into it because I actually did a whole review of that movie and I will link that down below, but please check that out because I have a lot of good thoughts in there, but I don't want to give you nothing, so let me just read you one of the reviews that I saw. Whatever point The Hunt may want to make or whatever value it might hope to have is pretty much obliterated by its violence. Okay, I gotta disagree, because I think that the violence contained so much irony with the message that they were trying to share, and I'm not gonna get too into the message and everything because I already made a whole video about that, so please check that out, because there are a lot more reviews that I disagree with, but I think that all of that is basically explained in the video that I previously made, so. The third movie on this list is The Possession. So this movie comes in at a 40%. Frustratingly low. When their youngest daughter, Em, becomes strangely obsessed with an antique wooden box bought from a yard sale, parents Clyde and Stephanie see little cause for alarm. However, Em becomes increasingly unstable, leading the couple to fear the presence of a malevolent force. To their horror, Clyde and Stephanie learn that the box contains a dislocated spirit that inhabits and ultimately devours a human host. So this is another really, really awesome case where a horror movie is super effective, super scary, super good, and it's PG-13. They do body horror in such a way. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that body horror is not my thing unless it's done right and it's done without crossing the line. I don't want to spoil it because the body horror provides some really good scares, so I don't want to talk about it. Just know that it's really good, and please watch it so you know what I'm talking about. One huge horror element in this movie is moths. And this might just be me because I actually have an extreme fear of moths. That's a story for another day. But it's a really good horror element. Moths freak me the fuck out. Might not be the same for you, but they definitely use them in a very, very effective way in this movie, and they're very scary. Also, what I've never seen in a possession movie is an MRI scene. And I don't want to spoil anything, but they have a scene where the little girl that's possessed gets an MRI, and that scene is pretty frightening, and the visuals are really interesting, and I don't know, it's just really unique. I've never seen anything like that before. The last thing I want to say for this movie is the child actors are great. They're phenomenal, and especially for a horror movie, child actors can make or break it. If you don't have good child actors, it might not be that scary. It'll just be kind of goofy and so the fact that the child actors are really good in this movie just takes it to the next level. So 40%, The fourth movie that I want to talk about is The Quiet Ones. So this is yet another possession movie, but this one comes in at a 37%. In The Quiet Ones, an unorthodox college professor leads his best students off the grid to perform a dangerous experiment to create a poltergeist. Operating under the theory that paranormal activity is triggered by negative human energy, the group uses a series of tests to push a young woman to the edge of sanity. Frightening occurrences with unspeakable consequences subsequently unfold, leading the researchers to the realization that they have unleashed a force more terrifying than they could have imagined. So this 37% irks me. It stars Olivia Cooke. You might recognize her from Bates Motel if you've ever seen that. It also stars Sam Claflin from The Hunger Games, among other roles. He's a great actor. As well as the incredibly famous Jared Harris. If you haven't heard of him, I know him best from his role in Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr., but I know he's been in countless other things. He's an amazing actor. So not only are there supernatural elements to this movie, but also add to that you have the sort of mad scientist trope that kind of comes into play with this professor. I don't want to spoil anything, but things get crazy, things get really uncomfy. There's just a lot of frightening, creepy elements besides the supernatural that I think makes it so worth watching. And I think it's highly underrated and literally underrated with a 37%. So please give it a watch. The fifth movie on my list is The Uninvited. This movie came out in 2009 and it is rated a 31%. In The Uninvited, after spending time in a psychiatric facility, young Anna finds significant changes in store at home. Her widowed father is now engaged to her mother's former nurse, Rachel. One night, the ghost of Anna's mother appears, screaming for revenge and accusing Rachel of murder. Anna and her sister Alex start to investigate, but they may be unprepared for the lethal battle of wills that ensues. So this movie actually has quite a few big names. It has Emily Browning, and she's in one of my favorite movies, A Series of Unfortunate Events, that also stars Jim Carrey. Ariel Kebbel is also in this movie. You might have recognized her from John Tucker Must Die. She's also in a couple seasons of The Vampire Diaries. And last but not least, this movie stars Elizabeth Banks as the evil nurse. And I put it in quotations because, as I mentioned in the synopsis, Anna has just returned home from a psychiatric facility. So a lot of things make you question what's actually real, split apart from what she's perceiving. So the whole movie is kind of a trip in that way, which I really enjoy because I don't feel like they exploited her mental health or her mental illness in any sort of way. So one critic said, producers of the Ring movies evidently didn't want to make fans wait until 2011 for the release of The Ring 3, so they're inviting them to take a slight detour. I didn't add that okay, that's actually in the review. It's actually in the review. And what I have to say to that is, yeah, so what? I love The Ring. That's a great movie, and this movie definitely has a Ring feel to it, but with like the color scheme and the production design, it's very Ring-esque, and so I love that tone. I love that vibe. You know what I'm saying. And the last thing I want to say is that this movie has an insane twist at the end, and you're gonna love it. You are. I'm telling you right now. The sixth movie on this list is The Bye-Bye Man. This came out in 2017 and it is rated at a 19%. People commit unthinkable acts every day. Time and again, we grapple to understand what drives a person to do such terrible things. But what if all of the questions we're asking are wrong? What if the cause of all evil is not a matter of what, but who? When three college friends stumble upon the horrific origins of the Bye-Bye Man, they discover that there is only one way to avoid his curse. Don't think it, don't say it. but once the bye-bye man gets inside your head, he takes control. Okay, that synopsis makes it sound way better than it actually is, because it does pose those questions, but it's not clear at all, so that synopsis is a little bit misleading. I know this movie isn't great. I know it's kind of full of plot holes, and some of the scares are just straight up dumb. But it's a great movie to throw on and maybe laugh at with your friends. I think that the characters are relatable, they're fine. I think the actors did an okay job. Some of the actors are really bad, but some of them are good. And there are actually some moments that really scared me. This is kind of a small spoiler, but it's in the trailer, so like not really. It's just about one of the scares. They're in bed and they're like looking at the corner and they think that the bye-bye man is like walking towards them, but it's actually just a coat on the wall. And I don't know about you guys, but whenever I wake up in the middle of the night and I feel like I see things like that and then realize it's just my coat. This movie actually captured that very accurately in terms of like the visuals and what you actually see. So I like that. I thought that that was really cool. At the end of the day, I know it's not great, but I don't think that it deserves a 19%. That's really low. The 7th movie on this list is The House at the End of the Street. This comes in at a 14%. In search of a fresh start, divorcee Sarah and her daughter Elisa find their dream house in a small town. But when startling, unexplainable events begin, the pair learn that a chilling secret holds the town in its grip. Years earlier, a girl killed her parents and disappeared, leaving a brother, Ryan, as the sole survivor. Elisa begins a relationship with Ryan, and the closer they get, the deeper they're all pulled into a dangerous mystery. So this movie stars Jennifer Lawrence, who we know her. It also stars Elizabeth Shue. You might recognize her from the original Karate Kid movie. This also stars Max Thieriot. You might recognize him from Bates Motel as well. So if you couldn't tell already, there's great acting in this movie and a great twist at the end. So a lot of critics said that this movie is a little bit slow. I don't remember finding it slow. I haven't seen it for a couple of years, but I remember liking the plot and the pacing. I thought it was fine. Also, why this movie scared me so much and why it lingered with me is because it's realistic and it's something that could happen to any of us, mainly girls, mainly young girls such as myself. So it's also like a cautionary tale, so I like that element. So I'm like, what's so bad about it? Like a 14%? Really? I don't know. Let's move on. The 8th and final movie that I want to talk about is Dream House. This movie comes in at a whopping 6%. 6. Publisher Will Attenton quits a lucrative job in New York to relocate his wife Libby and their daughters to a quaint town in New England. As they settle into their home, however, the Attentons discover that a woman and her children were murdered there, and the surviving husband is the town's prime suspect. With help from a neighbor who was close to the murdered family, Will pieces together a horrifying chain of events. So this movie stars Daniel Craig as the lead, our lovely James Bond, our current James Bond. It also stars Naomi Watts as the neighbor. We know her from The Ring, one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Probably already mentioned that in this video. And I guess this is not technically a horror film, it's more of a drama mystery, but it has the feel, it has the vibes of a horror movie. So I'm putting it on this list. Also because it's a 6%. It's 6. This movie will pull you in one direction for so long and then it's like BAM! Twist. If you couldn't tell by now, I love a good misdirect with a twist. Maybe I'm biased because of that. I just love twists. If you couldn't lead me in one direction and then be like, bam, you thought,
just kidding, psych,
then I'm gonna like it, I guess. I guess that's what we've learned today. Anyways, this movie is acted very well. It's shot fine. It doesn't look great, but it's shot fine. And maybe it's not terribly original, but it has its own flavor. The flavor. So I don't want to just talk forever and ever. I hope that you check these movies out and let me know what you think. Give them a chance. Don't always trust Rotten Tomatoes. Sometimes they're not always right. Or if you've seen them already, let me know if you agree with me, and if you disagree with me, please let me know why. I would love to foster a nice healthy discussion in the comments. Whether you're quarantining, social distancing, stay safe. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye.